Hey, welcome to Breaking the News Plus on this Monday night, June the 30th. It's hard to believe it's been, I think, 16 days since the assassination of Speaker Emerita Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark, the attempted assassination of Yvette Hoffman and her husband, Senator John Hoffman, and then several other lawmakers who had close calls. Throughout all of it, the discourse has continued on social media and in sound bites given to press. One person has really stood out to me in the state of Minnesota, and that is Senator Julia Coleman. Senator Coleman is in her, I believe, second term, a Republican, and she joins me today from her home. Hi, Julia.
Hey, thanks for having me. Apologize if you hear munchkins running around, but doing this from the kitchen.
Hey, we're working parents, so let's not pretend that we're not, and that is cool. Thank you for being on the show. Senator Coleman, I saw not once, not twice, a few times. You used your platform as a senator on social media to just pump the brakes on folks, media, and others that were delving into making something partisan like murder and making it something it wasn't. And in today's world, it shouldn't be something that's extraordinary, but it kind of is for you to do that. Why speak out? Why do the right thing, shockingly enough?
It was at the candlelit vigil for Speaker Hortman where all of us saw each other for the first time since we were woken up to people calling us around 5, 6 in the morning with what was probably the most horrific news I've ever received in my life. And it was so cathartic. It didn't matter what side of the aisle we were on. It didn't matter if we had been upset with each other for a long period of time. There were hugs, there were tears flowing, there were promises for all of us to get along and do better. And I believe right now there is this moment in Minnesota where we can continue building off of that. Mm-hmm. Or we can slide right back into the bad habits that we were all getting into. And by all, I mean legislators, our staff, members of the public, independent outside spending groups, even media sometimes.
Sure.
We all have this chance right now to stop the trend that we've been seeing for, I want to say, the last 5-10 years in politics.
I agree wholeheartedly. And, you know, it's not just a phrase. You hear it say, change begins with us. And for me, change begins with me, whatever the public's perception is of me at times. But I've been thinking a lot about it, too, and what we choose to put on our websites and our newscasts. And is it just the division? Because we make that choice. And when we do that, other people, you know, we have a big platform and they're seeing the division. And so we have a role to play too, and saying, let's talk about policy, not infighting when we don't have to, when it's just there for no purpose.
I think too, for us, we have the same responsibility. And so I am happy to be one of the most bipartisan members of the legislature, and I have a voting record that reflects that. But do I always share when we're working together? And sometimes I hesitate because in doing so, I get absolutely torn to shreds online. Wow. And I have long had a commitment to, I don't really read the comments. I have staff that can look at it and flag anything really pressing for me, because it's just so disheartening. And it's not real life and it's not reality. Real life is when I go door to door and my constituents say, you know, I don't really have a big issue. I just want you guys to work together and get along. And so everyone's got a responsibility here to, let's take this moment where we are all not only incredibly heartbroken, but incredibly willing to just start fresh. And let's try to undo what we've been doing and trending towards.
Yeah, you said things like, I think one of the first things I have here in my notes of what you wrote on social media, I'll just read it back. You said, this isn't about votes or power, rather honoring a life dedicated to service and showing Minnesotans we can and we must rise above disrespect and division. Tomorrow can represent a new path forward, but it takes all of us being there. And that's what I hear you saying now. I mean, it's foolish to think like we're all going to hold hands, meaning the two parties that have different ideas about the future of Minnesota or about policy, and just, you know, snuggle up to each other while they debate huge decisions for our state. But we can make the choice, like you and I teach our kids, to speak to each other respectfully and not, punch down, for lack of a better term, on social media especially.
And it sounds as though I almost missed the golden age in serving in the legislature. When I talked to people who came before me, giants of the Senate, Senator Tom Bach, when I spoke to Senator Thomasoni, Senator Rest, they talk about how we used to all get together. We used to have, cocktail hours and mixers and outings as a legislative body. And that's where we got to know about each other's kids and get to know each other's personalities. And that all went away. Our bus to the Hortman funeral was the first time we've all ever gone somewhere together. And I think that has really made it so when we see each other, it's just, fist fighting across the aisle, and there's never that time to reconnect. They say you fight like family, but then we don't make up like family.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And about, we've heard that even at the federal level, and people like Senator John McCain, friends with Senator Ted Kennedy. It was almost like, politics in some way at that time was really sport, like you have your jersey on your side, you fight for fiscal responsibility, you fight for social services, you fight for the things that you believe in. But at the end of the day, you have kids, you have families, you have homes, you care about things as well. And it's my belief that I think harder about issues when I'm talking to someone that disagrees with me.
Oh, absolutely. And I encourage all people, whether you're a voting member of the public or a reporter, if you interact or engage in policy in some way, have a friend or a colleague you can speak to who serves or believes the opposite side of what you believe. And I'll post on social media occasionally, hey, if you are on this side of the aisle and you want to know why I believe what I believe, let's get a glass of wine or something. Let's talk it over. And it's amazing how people will go in with genuine curiosity and come out with an understanding, saying, I don't agree still, but I get where you're coming from now. And I think that we should all be doing this much more often.
Something like what happened to Mark and Melissa, John and Yvette, and could have been, as you mentioned, Senator Rest. I remember talking to Senator Aaron Murphy about this, and, we all had worry or concern. Is this going to take people like you who are young, have young families, kind of out of politics because we don't live in a world that can handle respectful disagreement? We have these outliers in community that take political disagreement and take it somewhere, political violence?
Law enforcement sitting outside my home was the first time my 5-year-old ever asked me to quit doing this job because he's scared. And my initial reaction is, okay, I'm just going to publicly resign, hit send, because, when your 5-year-old's looking at you with tears in his eyes, that's your first reaction. And then I think about, well, who's going to fill those shoes then? And what are they going to do for the next generation that's coming up? And what am I showing young people that want to serve in elected office? And so it almost makes you want to double down. But I do think that people are going to be more scared than ever before. I try to recruit women to run all the time. And there's the traditional issues of, I don't know how to make it work with the home-life balance, which I always tell them, I had twins in office. You can do it. You can do it. There's nothing special about me. But then now what I also get is good people not wanting to have their names absolutely slandered and be unhireable in the future and just get torn apart. They don't want their kids being made fun of in school. And there's this moment for all Minnesotans to step up to the plate. There's people that have yelled at me before in front of my children at the doors, and that doesn't have to happen. And we can all, take this tragedy and take a step back.
Yeah, it's interesting that really echoes, my first interview after the assassinations was with Senator Murphy, and she said almost the exact same thing. Like, a line has been drawn and crossed, one that we couldn't even have had a nightmare of imagining, even though the handwriting was on the wall about we see political violence in both parties. The current president, there's been 2 assassination attempts on him. One of them we saw on television. Setting fire to the governor of Pennsylvania's home. Nancy Pelosi's husband being beaten with a hammer. Like, we're seeing it. But here in Minnesota, we have had the worst example that we could have ever have imagined. And we have a choice about where we go from here. Is that what I hear you saying?
Absolutely. And there's this group. So I firmly believe in no negative campaigning. I've never sent out a negative piece ever in my life, and I never will. And there's a group, I'm sure you're familiar with, Majority in the Middle.
Hmm.
And I was talking to their executive director about, we should put out a positive campaign pledge for candidates. We are coming into, 2026 next go around. This is a perfect opportunity to develop it because we're recruiting candidates, and I'll be the first to sign it. And I think that we also have to ask, outside spending groups to follow our lead, because while I've never sent a negative ad, some people have that have my picture on it, and you'll
Mm,
notice until you read the little fine print on the bottom that I didn't even know it was coming. It had nothing to do with me. It's got to be a group effort. We all have to row the boat in the same direction. And I don't believe rhetoric necessarily causes violence unless you say, "Hey, go
sure.
physically attack these people." But I do believe that it can raise the temperature
Right.
that will set people off to do things like this. And um, I don't ever want to see my 5-year-old look at me with fear in his eyes because of my job again. And so that's why I'm taking this so seriously.
It's the biggest reason there is. Last question is kind of silly, but I assume some people at home might be thinking it when they see this. You know, working across the aisle, they may think makes someone unelectable in the current, or unreelectable in the current climate. But what if you prove them wrong?
I hope I do. I really hope I do. I'm in a swing district, and I have always outperformed the top of the ticket. And when I go door to door, they say it's because you are willing to work out across the aisle. But what we need, and I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, what we need is to move away from being solely a caucus state and moving more towards being a primary state, because then you're having the extremes on both ends of the party pick our candidates versus the general public that doesn't even know how to caucus.
Right.
And so that allows for much more involvement. I mean, our active duty military can't even choose who their candidates are in the state if they're deployed, or a mother on bed rest like I've been before. And I just want to see as many people participating as possible in our candidate selection, because then I think we're going to see people that are saying, "I'm not voting for you unless you are willing to work across the aisle." And I think that's a huge part of it.
Well, I may get in trouble for saying it, that I totally agree with you. I am not from Minnesota. The whole caucus model, I'm sure it has its pluses, but for all the reasons you mentioned and some others, people wind up saying, like, well, wait, why is that the person endorsed by the Republican Party? Why is that the person endorsed by the Democrats? Nobody asked me. I didn't pick them. And there were good candidates too? What?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's probably a way to do both. I know there's states that do both, but
Okay.
the way it's set up right now in Minnesota, it's pretty much the endorsement caucus system rules the show.
Well, sounds like you got a lot of work to do, Senator Julia Coleman. In
And
addition
hence the
to,
caffeine problem we talked about.
yeah. Well, I appreciate your candor. I appreciate your kindness. I appreciate your work. Thank you for joining us tonight. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
That's all for Breaking the News Plus on this Monday night.